Russell Poole wrote a review of Murder Rap on January the 26th, 2013, and this is what he said. Greg Kading has no credibility on this subject matter. He became a task force member on the Biggie case 10 years after the fact. Kading left the LAPD in disgrace for his false testimony on a federal murder and racketeering case, United States versus George Toros Ramos, CR 06-656 ASVW. Guilty verdicts were overturned in part due to Kading's testimony. He said LAPD cleared him of those charges, but that is not entirely true. Kading also had some help in writing this book from disgraced LA Times reporter Chuck Phillips. Kading forgets there were actual eyewitnesses to the Biggie killing. He spends a lot of time talking about things he knows nothing about. This is a desperate attempt for Kading to salvage his reputation. Suge Knight is a suspect, but not for the reasons Kading talks about. In closing, Kading never attempted to interview me regarding Biggie's investigation. He makes a lot of false statements about me and my part in the investigation, and that's written by retired LAPD homicide detective Russell Poole. There were hundreds of eyewitnesses in both of these shootings, and those eyewitnesses mostly were chased off by police. They didn't want them to fill out witness cards, which is standard practice. They usually hold witnesses, but in the cases of these murders, they wanted to chase these witnesses off. And we start to dig into this a little bit to see why this would be. Why do they want to chase witnesses off in these cases? And this is kind of standard operating procedure for death row events. Whenever an incident occurs, the witnesses seem to get chased off. And I want to put things into perspective today. The city of Los Angeles operates with a $9 billion budget every year. They employ 47,000 people. And when you think about a $9 billion budget, if there was a judgment for Christopher Wallace in the amount of $1 billion plus $3 billion in punitive damages, that's a $4 billion number. And we know Kevin Gaines was on special assignment in Las Vegas the night that Tupac was shot, all the way until 2 days after Tupac dies. So we know that LAPD could be held liable for the murder of Tupac Shakur, and then that becomes another $4 billion deal for the city of Los Angeles. So when you have a $9 billion budget and you have a $8 billion problem, that's enough to bankrupt any organization, including the city of Los Angeles. And so you have this cover-up that starts almost immediately. And so today, we're going to dig into the cover-up behind Death Row Records' involvement with LAPD officers and their involvement in what is commonly known as the Rampart Scandal. Now, the Rampart Scandal paid out over $100 million in awards to people that were affected by corrupt police officers. Now, just the two murders of Biggie and Tupac would have been $8 billion. But if the full depth of what these cops had done was fully known, I mean, think about it. Kelly Jamerson's family has a claim against the city of Los Angeles. And there's countless others. Mark Anthony Bell has a claim. There were two police officers that were present at the Death Row Records party. And so you just look at all of the innocent people that these guys put away, and the claims would be staggering. And this is something that would bankrupt the city of Los Angeles. And so that's why you can afford to have a cover-up. You can afford to have a book and movies and television series that get made to cover up the Rampart Scandal. And that's what murder rap is. It's part of the cover-up. It's an LAPD police officer who gets paraded around to talk about the narrative. And that's what this cover-up is all about. It's about shielding the LAPD and the city of Los Angeles from having to pay out huge settlements in these cases. But I contend now that it's 20 years ago, and it's time for the city of Los Angeles to come clean about this, for the LAPD to come clean about this, and to learn what we can learn from the lessons of how these corrupt cops infiltrated the LAPD and the other police organizations, including the Compton PD, and what we can learn from it and how we can prevent this from ever happening again. When Russell Poole uncovered evidence that David Mack, Kevin Gaines, and Rafael Perez were connected, and they were connected to Death Row Records, he was ordered by his superiors to leave it alone. Deputy Chief Parks, who was the supervisor of internal affairs, ordered Russell Poole to submit his report to the district attorney's office the way it was, not to investigate any further. Russell Poole started to follow up on leads of the connection between Mack, Perez, Gaines, and Death Row Records. He brought it to his supervisors, and he was told, "We're not going to get involved in that. Mack has already gone down for bank robbery. Let's not get involved in more controversy." Russell uncovered that Kevin Gaines had a relationship with Suge Knight's ex-wife, and that evidence was surfacing that several LAPD officers, including Mack, Gaines, and Perez, were living with financial means way beyond their money that they were getting from the LAPD, and also their gang affiliation was surfacing. So when Russell attempted to investigate Kevin Gaines further, LAPD officers began interfering with the investigation, and they were actually out interviewing and intimidating witnesses before he could get to them. And he was prevented from writing up his reports. He was ordered to leave it alone. He was told by his superiors, "Gaines is dead. We don't need to know anything more." In Russell Poole's investigation report involving the Biggie Smalls murder, he turned it in. 3 of the pages of text were redlined, and they were ordered to be deleted by his superiors. So Russell also began to be hazed by his fellow LAPD officers inside of robbery homicide. They left a picture on his desk that had a picture of a sewer pipe with excrement at the bottom and a arrow pointing to it and a caption that read, "You are here." And he began to be intimidated and to be ostracized by the people that are inside of robbery homicide, because he was investigating all of these crimes, and it kept leading back to LAPD cops. Russell had crossed that thin blue line, and he was being hazed as a result of this. So Russell Poole was also assigned to investigate the theft of evidence out of the evidence lockers by Rafael Perez. Perez had been caught stealing cocaine out of the evidence lockers, and Russell was brought in to investigate this. Russell served a search warrant on Rafael Perez's girlfriend's home, and he found pictures of Perez wearing gang colors and flashing gang signs, and he had an affiliation with the Bloods. Also discovered was a box of police reports, and basically what they were doing is using boilerplate similar language for all of the police reports that they were turning in. So Russell applied to his supervisors to investigate 6 more cases, and his request was denied, and the police said, leave it alone, leave it alone. So these were people that were put in prison, innocent people that were put in prison by Rafael Perez, David Mack, and Kevin Gaines. Russell Poole also complained that there was a pattern and a practice of the LAPD Rampart cops in targeting gang members without probable cause. They were assaulted, and they were retaliating against any of the gang members that complained. And so Russell went to his supervisors once again and said, hey, this is something that needs to be looked into. And again, he was ordered, leave it alone. Basically a battle between Deputy Chief Bernard Parks and Russell Poole. And Bernard Parks is the deputy supervising internal affairs at the time, and he's constantly telling Russell to leave it alone. And he's instructing Russell, only get general statements from witnesses, don't get anything detailed, and only use what's called a compelled statement. Compelled statements are statements made by police officers during an internal affairs investigation, and it's protected from disclosure under the law. So an investigator could receive an incriminating compelled statement regarding police abuse of power or civil rights and not legally be required to disclose it to anyone, including the Los Angeles District Attorney. So LAPD Internal Affairs only elicit enough compelled statements to get the officers fired, and that doesn't tip off anybody that there's possible criminal activity or civil rights abuses, and that means innocent men and women are sitting in prison today based on what these Rampart Scandal cops did. So in the fall of 1998, Russell Poole had a meeting with Deputy Chief Parks and Hernandez and other top-ranking officials that were inside of LAPD, and he told them that his investigation was not complete, and in order to make a solid case for the district attorney, he needed more time and resources to gather additional information. And as he was talking about this, Parks stopped him and said, absolutely not. Limit your investigation and don't add anything else. So Russell complained to Parks and said that it's more than just one case. It goes a lot deeper. You got a group of vigilante cops at the Rampart Division. And Parks then asked for Russell to complete his report in 2 weeks. The report was prepared and it was submitted. It was a 40-page report, and it was given to Lieutenant Hernandez and to Deputy Chief Parks, and when they got it, they told him, we can't hand this in, the chief doesn't want this. And so he was asked, Russell was asked then to turn in his report, the computer disk that it was on, all other copies of this, and Russell understood that this meant they were going to destroy his report. And later, Russell was then handed a report that was a 2-page report, and they asked Russell to sign his name on it. But Russell refused because he saw that report as obstruction of justice. So in October of 1999, Russell Poole decided it was time to resign because of his problems with the department. And his exit paperwork indicated that he was subject to rehire. But they had clearly created a very hostile work environment for Russell Poole, and he felt that he needed to leave the department rather than participate in the cover-up, the obstruction of justice that was going on at the highest levels of the LAPD. What I'd like to do is go through the offices that have bearing on this case. And let's look at the city offices first. First, we have the city attorney. And the city attorney is a very important position. And we have James Hahn, who is the city attorney when the whole Rampart scandal actually happens. Then after Jim Hahn is termed out, we have Rocky Delgadillo who comes in. And Rocky Delgadillo is somebody who was at O'Melveny and Myers, and he was a deputy mayor of economic development under Richard Reardon. So he comes in 2001, and he's reelected city attorney in 2005. So through the whole Wallace civil trial, we had Rocky Delgadillo as the city attorney. Let's look at who was district attorney at the time the Rampart scandal went down. Well, that would be Gil Garcetti. Gil Garcetti was the district attorney at the time the whole Rampart scandal went down. Now, who is the mayor today? The mayor today is Eric Garcetti. And so Eric Garcetti probably knows the truth about what happened in the Rampart scandal. Let's look at police chief, okay? We have the Gaines-Liga incident, and at the time this was happening, Willie Williams was the police chief, and he gets pushed out. There's an interim police chief that comes in, and the only person that can be selected as police chief is Bernard Parks. And Bernard Parks was in charge of internal affairs where Kevin Gaines worked. And Rafael Perez and David Mack were hand-picked recruits by Police Chief Bernard Parks. Now, when the consent decree comes down and the federal government has to basically take over the police department, they have to bring in an outsider. So who do they bring in? They bring in somebody from New York. They bring in Bill Bratton, and Bill Bratton's there. Now, at the time, Bill Bratton comes in, who is sent over to rehabilitate the Rampart Police Department. Well, that's Charlie Beck. And then Charlie Beck becomes the police chief next. And who is involved and has to testify at the Wallace civil trial? That would be Michael Moore. And who is the police chief currently? Currently, the police chief is Michael Moore. And so you see, when this is an $8 billion problem for the city of Los Angeles, they definitely have taken a lot of care in selecting people that are willing to go the distance, know where the bones are buried, to make sure that this never bubbles up again. And we have those people in place right now. So when it comes to the politics of Los Angeles, over the last 2 decades, politicians have been elected that have ties to this Rampart scandal. Big money has backed their campaigns because they knew that if somebody was ever put into office, that was going to open up this can of worms. It would be extremely costly for the city of Los Angeles, and those people that have the most to lose by the city of Los Angeles going bankrupt have funded campaigns to make sure that people with deep ties into the Rampart scandal always remain in control and can cap off this single one event. And this has guided politics in Los Angeles for the last 2 decades.